Good morning again and welcome to Forum 1, Superannuation in 2025. This session focuses on research that AIST has conducted with BNP Paribas around what over 100 trustees and executives envisage superannuation will look like in a decade's time and what the key issues will be. This will help inform us how to best shape the industry, overcome challenges and maximise opportunities to deliver for the members. Questions were asked around investments, fund demographics, risk, technology and regulation. The research findings are illuminating, and here to discuss them are Jayne, Relationship Manager from BNP Paribas, and Guy McKanna, Media and Corporate Affairs from BNP Paribas. I will not go through their bios today as they're in the conference app. The AXA Investment Manager's live Q&A is now open and will be open for the duration of the session. We'll answer any questions as they come along, so please feel to send them through. And I'll also let you know that the research paper will be available to you as you leave the session at the end of it. So I think we'll start straight away. So Jayne, what does the Australian superannuation community worry will be the biggest strategic risk in a decade?
Well, Tom, over 40% of respondents think that regulatory change will still be one of the biggest risks to our industry in 2025, and over 70% thought there would be even more change in a decade than there is now. So the industry is clearly worried that there won't be any relief in the future. And that's not surprising, given everyone's been through Stronger Super, which was a great burden on the industry in terms of reporting and processes that needed to be worked through. And respondents are obviously still worried that the government may look to super for revenue in the future. I think a few of the speakers this morning spoke about Joe Hockey's comments about allowing people to access their super early. So comments like those are obviously causing concern in the superannuation industry that the government may continue to tinker with the system.
Okay. But is there a risk there that the industry is concentrating on regulatory change in 10 years' time when that's actually what we're going through today?
You said it, Tom. It's quite interesting. We had a full auditorium here earlier and more than half the people have gone to the economic session. I guess everyone's still focusing on what's happening in the markets today, be it regulatory change, volatility, the next best asset class. Whereas, congratulations, you've stayed for what is probably the most important session for you. We do need to take a long-term outlook. We're going to have to focus on those day-to-day things as it is. You've just got to get through that regulatory change, delegate, get to someone to look after it. But in 10 years' time, we're still going to have some change. Some people are saying we're going to have more. Some are saying we're going to have less. It'll still be there. But it's the things that we don't know are going to happen. Like 10 years ago, iPads and iPhones didn't exist. Now we use them every day. What else is going to come out that is not there? We've done this report to help you with that, to move you away from the day-to-day, to make you think a little bit longer term, 10 years. The Chinese would think that's probably a bit too short term, but we think it's not bad for us. So in the report, have a look. There's things there that you're going to have to address. So you're going to have to do today's things, the markets, regulatory change and likes. Some things you're going to have to work to in 10 years, and we'll come back to those in a moment. And then some things we don't even know about that are going to impact us. And hopefully we'll touch on a few of those if we've got time today.
So should funds be getting, therefore, ready for the next big thing? And how should they be doing that, Guy?
The questionnaire was really interesting, the responses we got. Some people said they should have a futurist on their board or on staff at least to think about what is coming. Some of the things that we know are going to come, Google Bank, Amazon Bank. Some superannuation funds are already looking at doing home loans. Some are going to be offering credit cards. Is that a bit too me too? Yes and no. One of the things we know that is definitely going to have to be looked at by everybody is personalisation. I'm fortunately in a nice super fund where I can change my asset allocation. It's a bit clunky. I've got to do it through a lot of paperwork. I'd love to do it online. I'd actually love someone to ring me and say, you know what you've just done? Maybe that's not quite as good as it should be. You could do this. So I think we're going to get a lot more personalisation. We're going to really have to use the technology that's here already and adapt it to better serving our people. We talk about education, member engagement. We heard a lot of that in the previous session. That technology's there. I talk to my children about superannuation. They look at me a bit glazed. But they understand it. They come to me and say, what do I do now? I say, that's a really good fund. Stay in that one. Go for this high growth. So they're starting to ask, and I think that's what one of the earlier speakers was talking about. You've got to engage with your audiences, be your kids, your friends, the likes. You can do that more through technology, social media and the like. So some of the things that are there already, 10 years, there's bound to be something else. We don't even know what technology it will be as yet, but we're going to have to be ready to
That's
pick it up.
right. I mean, that's an interesting discussion there about this almost obsession with choice. Yet, you know, when you speak to a lot of people from other countries, etc., that are looking at systems, choice is actually not the greatest thing. You know, you should be trying to get a default system that looks after people to the very end. And actually, ideally, if they don't have a lot of choice, it's better because it'll change your investment allocation and those sorts of things. So we've got to try and find that balance, don't we?
That was actually one of the most interesting questions in the whole survey was about life cycle funds. Will they be the default fund in 10 years? And it was split a third each. A third of respondents, and thank you for those of you who responded, a third said yes, a third said no, and a third were uncertain. And yet logically you'd think a life cycle fund would be the easy default option. We're seeing respondents come back saying they want cradle-to-grave solutions, service for people, and there's a way to do it, but we're still uncertain about that. Are we talking about the wrong things? We're talking about regulation, Joe hockey, and all the distractions of the day. You've got to cover that, but we've also got to step up to where we are in the world. You know, we're one of the world's top industries. I think we've slipped back a bit because we're focusing on the issues we have at hand, not about where we need to be in 10 years. And I think if we do that again, we'll really start to take our leadership back. The industry will grow in other ways that we're not even thinking of. So you've got to just step back, be brave, do it all.
So if we then move on to, I guess, taking that segue on life cycle, we might come back to that. Jayne, what about the investor priorities? What was sort of some of the information that came out where their priorities would sit within the decade?
Well, what we found was that investor needs have remained constant, or it's expected that investor needs will remain constant in the decade ahead. 67% said that returns were of high importance, and 32% said moderate importance. So clearly there's no lessening in the importance of returns in asset manager selection. Of the other things that were important to our respondents, new investment ideas came in, risk reduction, better data and analytics, and reduced volatility. So the asset manager who will enjoy the most success in 20 to 25 will probably be one who combines returns with a risk reduction strategy. Now, there's a couple of ways they can do that. They can either in-house that risk reduction, or they can use some sort of innovative outsourced provider for that. But either way, what they're going to have to focus on is a strong risk management framework covering people, processes and platforms, and they're going to do that have to do that in a cost-effective way so that they can continue to maximise returns without losing that cost-effective strategy.
All right, so it seems to be that there's going to be a greater focus on risk, is there, in terms of focusing on that rather than the investment as such? Or?
It's a combination, Tom. The research was very clear. There's a lot of issues out there. Regulation was one, and that's today's. Risk is the ongoing one. And how do you actually get those returns with little or less risk? A lot of managers, Australian equities funds, are out there. Who do you pick? Passive, active, in-house, out-house, in-sourcing, etc.
Right.
We need to start differentiating more, and risk is one of the ways you can do it. You can see how much risk is being taken. There's great analytics now from other countries, other sources, that allow you to see if someone's taking what they call a bet, or they've got less risk. There's a lot of techniques there, and I think the industry hasn't quite caught up to what's actually out there around the world at the moment.
What about in terms of then using benchmarks and, you know, absolute returns? Is there a move to that sort of measurement as opposed to just rating what's happening with the peers?
Definitely. As we want to see how we're going, I mean, think of your own super return allocations and your report that you get your return percentage. I mean, you don't really see how it went compared to last year, the year before. You don't get absolute returns. There's a lot more ways we can actually present the information to members. And I think, again, this is where we need to use that technology to show, hey, here is different ways of measuring what you actually earned. And people go, oh, okay, well, it might have been great compared to peers, but geez, it was still pretty good for what I want. and we're going to deliver that personalised. We're going to deliver it on iPhones, iPads. We can pretty much do most of this right now, but very few firms, super funds, managers, institutions are doing it, and I'm not sure why.
What about, to move on a little bit more on sort of the types of assets? Is there a change in the sorts of assets that they want to be investing in? Did we get much of that information through the survey?
Real assets, as you might know, are very popular. IFM, the big toll road investments. The real assets are direct property, direct infrastructure, something that's real and tangible. They tend to have long-term income streams through dividends or the like. We actually treat bank stocks as almost real assets because you're going to get those dividends. So we've gone that way. Other countries have gone more for property, others have gone for infrastructure. So we're seeing funds trying to spread out the risk over time, which is a normal way to do it. Pension funds in the US have done that. I think we've got to just start to figure out other ways to do that. There's some interesting research from the fund in a moment about ageing. Okay.
So what about, I noticed there was a bit of interesting information about post-retirement and I guess the risk appetite of investors in the next decade. Where did we come to with regards to post-retirement? Because I found it quite interesting that 90% of respondents said that the post-retirement product will be a key focus in 2025. I would have thought it would be a key focus right now.
Yeah, Tom, we agree. We think that the move to post-retirement products is actually happening sooner than 20 to 25, particularly as funds are moving from an accumulation to a decumulation phase. We think that there'll be a new range of products and services to meet that post-retirement, and that's what we're seeing now with our clients. They're certainly looking for more innovation in that space. It was interesting to note too around the statistics on capital protection. So 84% of our respondents said that there would be some capital protection on products in 2025, and only 11% said that most products would have a form of capital protection, which is kind of interesting because there's a disparity there. So there'll still be that choice, I guess, is the...
I think another one of the interesting questions that came up out of the survey, and we actually had a lunch on it the other day, was insourcing versus outsourcing. Did we get any information from the surveys on where they think the industry is going in terms of insourcing and outsourcing of investments in particular?
Yeah, look, this was very interesting. 2/3 of the respondents said more funds management functions will be brought in-house, including general administration functions. Only a quarter said there would be no increase. We agree, and as a custodian we've responded to that by creating a dealing desk service so that funds can act on their investment decisions while not bearing that restrictive cost of a dealing desk. But the research has also shown that there are other types of insourcing that they're expecting to do. Member advice, IT and software platforms, and then more general administration such as marketing, legal, accounting. So what we're expecting to see is much more of those things going in-house.
I guess that would throw up, if you're talking about all those things being insourced and we're seeing more and more funds having larger and larger teams, is this sort of, was there any trend at all coming through from the research about the move to a mega fund or a Big Four fund? What were the people who responded to the survey thinking about the construction of the industry in the future?
That was an interesting one. Do we expect the industry to follow the banks and end up with the Big Four banks, Big Four super funds? About 40% of people think so. They're concerned that will happen. It's like any industry, you have to differentiate enough to provide a value proposition to your members, investors, to say, we're relevant, we are worth your investment time, money and consideration. So I think that's the key there, and that's why we think this long-term outlook's really important, so you can better position yourself against what the issues are. Otherwise, it will happen. You'll see funds continue to amalgamate, to merge. It'll lead to certain things. Yes, some people thought it'd be more funds, more institutions. Others thought there'll be less. So we're a little uncertain on that as an industry, where it's going to lead to. But from the research, it was obvious that it's up to all of us to differentiate, to really provide a service that solves your issues, meets the challenges, and differentiates you from the fund next to you.
So was there then a concentration or response from the members to say that scale was the solution? Because scale is not always the solution of delivering member benefits, so this natural conclusion that we'll end up with a future fund, I don't think is actually against competition, isn't it?
Yes.
So what was some of the information that came out around scale?
Scale doesn't always work, as we know. You'll get to a point where you look at what you're insourcing and find that, yes, that adds value, you're doing it at a cheaper cost than you were before, but if for some reason you're insourcing it's costing you more, you've got to just turn that around again. Scale can also make you complacent. As you get bigger, you can go, great, we've got enough members, we've got the scale that we need, and then you go off to the economic session and you don't bother about the future. There's a saying in the industry that you've got to continue to evolve, you've just got to keep improving every year. Well, there's also another saying that you've got to actually have a revolution in your company every 7 years, because you do get stayed. You become so steadfast and set in your ways that you just keep doing the same. You keep cutting costs, cutting a bit more costs, bringing this little bit in here and the likes. I hate to say it, but cost reduction isn't a strategy, it's a technique. Cost reduction is not a strategy, it's not a long-term business strategy. There comes a point where you can't keep cutting costs. You're just going to eat your business away. So
within that, I might jump back to a little bit and your notion of having a futurist in the company. I mean, if there's this discussion around, you can't just keep cutting costs, yet the amount of regulation that the funds have got to concentrate on, there's an inherent cost linked to that. How do they get time to think about where do we want to be in 10 years, and what are some techniques that perhaps even BNP Paribas use or other business that you understand do to use? Obviously the board does that, but are they using other people or inputs to do that, to work out what's happening in 10 years?
Regulation is actually a really good one, because when it first started coming in, people would outsource to lawyers, legal firms, and so you get the experts involved and you start to meet your regulations. You then start to liaise with the regulators, find out what you need to do. You then start hiring more lawyers, risk managers, bring it in-house. You start to get the cost up and you go, oh, that's a bit expensive. You cut here and there to bring it back down, liaise with regulators again to try and find out better ways to do it. You might use a custodian. We did some research, a separate report that found regulations added cost to 8 out of 10 respondents. Half of those who actually use a custodian found it reduced costs. So you might use something like that to bring it down, and global regulation is a good example. It's really expensive to meet your regulators' requirements offshore, and that's why I think the global custodians are taking the market here, because you have so many different regulations that you've got to meet around the world. So then once you've got that set, you start to not corral it, but it's in its own department, working away, reports to the board, other management, and then you've got to have other people start thinking, well, geez, what's next? Technology, personalisation, okay, how do we do that? And yes, you've got to spend a little bit of money, or you get people to help you. We are helping our clients and prospects by helping them with their strategy days, their leadership sessions. We go in and talk to them. We bring people from Singapore out to talk about risk analytics, just to help people think about what the issues are in the future. And sometimes it's as simple as that, just to come to a session like this and think about what else is happening in the world that you need to move towards, what might be coming.
So then from the research, Jayne, what were some of the innovations that the industry were predicting in 2025?
Well, there were some terrific ideas came through, which suggests there's some really good strategic minds out there. A cradle-to-grave service with education, financing, superannuation, banking services, mortgage services, and then more esoteric life coaching, healthcare, aged care, God bless. We, in the last session, people were talking about the growth and the need for health services. So this again would help drive engagement and loyalty, and it's probably around providing that whole life cycle of services. Personalisation of the member experience was a big theme, being able to harness big data effectively to do that and gain the insights there. Product teams, perhaps including a behavioural psychologist to analyse the data to help predict and cater for the needs and behaviour of members. So this goes a lot further than just nudging products based on age, gender and demographics.
Another one was that we asked, should there be more international board directors? And as you can see, the answer was no, which we thought was quite surprising. There's a whole world out there. We're a world-class industry. Shouldn't we be getting a little bit more experience from offshore? Some different perspectives. And it's as you said about the pension, it's part of it. We know people are going to want income when they're we're retired, yet we're not moving that fast in that area unless you're all doing things very secretly in quiet that we don't know about.
No, I mean, I suspect that, there is some there saying that there will be some international board directors. I would suspect that in time, as the funds get bigger and start investing overseas, then they'll start to need to have that, and or our directors will start going overseas. So I would suspect that will be a trend myself. So then what does that mean to some of the professional profile of the leaders in this industry? How have they got to change, Guy?
Education, I think, is always key. We talk about educating our members, but we've got to educate ourselves, and that's why we did this research, because we had some ideas, but we didn't have all the answers, and I don't think we've covered a lot of everything in this, but it gives us some food for thought to start to think about, geez, what else do we need to do? Things we asked about, how could we improve the whole industry's future? Better investor protection was a key one. You could say we're already doing that with the regulators, but maybe there's something else that people are looking for it to happen. So that's why it's worth just taking it home. You'll get copies on the way out, have a read and see what you think that inspires you. But I think as trustees, directors, leaders of our organisations, we have to step up and just start to think a little bit more about, geez, where are we going to be in 10 years? I know my regulatory obligations are going to be met. We're going to start doing some pension products, retirement income. We're going to have to get that technology team working a bit better, thinking more about the future rather than just solving our day-to-day problems. And then be prepared for what comes from left field, technology, what else it delivers and what the competition does.
So we've got one question that's come up here. It says, is it not a little dangerous to allow some unsophisticated members what is that? That's written strangely.
Too many investment
I'll try it
options.
again. Some unsophisticated investors too many investment options, which was one of the comments we made at the beginning, this way up between trying to have a decent default system and allowing people complete choice. So, I think that's a good question. Is it dangerous? I tend to think it is. If we want to try and get the system running efficiently, but if you've got any views, then certainly happy to hear them.
Yes and no is a nice, safe custodian answer. When you've only got the 5 options, high growth down to low risk, it's obviously not enough for some people. It is for most people. I'm thinking of my own fund where I can choose from a couple of 100 options. Yes, that's too much, especially when so many of them are giving similar returns in some of those funds. And that's where I think, do we step up and have someone that when you want to change your default or you want more information, there's the perfect opportunity to have some advice, someone on staff, call centre, outsourced, that says, hey, you've just picked 20 funds that you want to invest in. That's, what are you trying to do with your investments here?
Doesn't seem a particularly efficient way to run a 40-year investment. And I guess that's one of the things that, when we're talking about cradle to grave, a CEO recently put it to me that when someone starts at the super fund as a member, it's a 70-year relationship that you're trying to have. And he even put it that could then be 7 different boards. So, the strategy's got to roll across 7 different sets of thinking to try and get them to an end benefit, which is their end return. So this is coming into that strategy and thinking a long way ahead to try and get these things. Did we get any questions on cybercrime? I went to a recent forum, and when people had sort of ignored that, and someone brought up saying, there's $1.8 trillion. There's an enormous amount of money sitting there that is in default. So you've got people who are, in theory, disinterested. Looks like a nice big fat target to cybercrime. Did we get anything around those ideas of what are people thinking on that front to try and protect the money?
Interestingly, there are only a few. It wasn't as big an issue as we first thought it would be. From previous experience, it's one of those areas that will continue, and it actually goes in cycle. It goes up and down. As some of the criminals figure out new ways to do things arises, then the technology companies, banks, etc. find a solution, and so it goes down again. So over the years, it's not actually gone like this upwards, it's actually gone along more so. Dollar values might be a bit larger, but it's an interesting one. It's always going to be there, so you've got to be aware of it. But again, do you delegate it internally, externally? How do you do it?
So I guess there was one big section we didn't cover was the global economy, and yes, they're doing it next door, but we might have a little touch of it now. What were the thoughts around where the respondents thought the global economy would be in 10 years' time?
Interestingly, most people thought it would be better than it is now, just above trend, historic trend. So we're expecting it to get better. The organisations such as OECD, IMF, World Bank and the likes also think the same. It'll be a little bit better. The interesting finding was, from yourselves, do you think there'll be another downturn between now and then? And the majority of respondents said yes. So we'll probably go through some tough times again. There's in theory that there will be a downturn/recession every 7 years. Will it happen at that cycle? The last one's gone on for quite a while, 8 years. So generally that resets it to make them a bit shorter so that you'll go through a downturn and you'll get out of it quicker. And history rhymes, doesn't always repeat.
Where were they seeing that growth would be? Was it in the typical countries or was it in emerging markets? What was the belief around that area?
Real assets again. They're expecting it to go into those direct property, direct real estate and the likes. We've seen huge prices for IFM paying for toll roads. Does that mean there will be a bubble there, that prices are already really high in some of these areas? Yes, they are. So direct assets are a little harder in that you've got to find the value. You can pay too much. Will they bust? Hard to tell because they're actually real things that they can't really lose a huge amount of value. You just have less people using them in downturns.
Which again comes back to the first question. So if more and more people are wanting to or believe that the value is going to come to deliver performance in real assets, which is bringing that illiquidity benefit, giving people unlimited choice doesn't help trustees understand where to put the money because they've got to have less money available for liquid assets. So this is where we need to find this balance, I think.
One of the areas we addressed in here was asset allocation. And it's a fascinating area in that traditionally it was top-down. You'd say 60% stocks, 40% income, in fixed income. And when one went down, the other would go up. Well, we know that doesn't work from the last downturn, do we? So we spread it out a bit more. Might be 40, 50% stocks, 20, 30% fixed income, some real assets, hedge funds, cash, all sorts of things. So it's getting more diversified. Some of our smarter funds here are actually taking a bottom-up approach where they'll look at individual investments. They'll be offered a property somewhere and look at it and go, great, 8%, no, oh, that one's 12%. Yes, we're interested in that because we know we're going to get a better return from that than this. So the old top-down, bottom-up, mix in the middle, it's getting much more complicated, but I think that's where it's going to end up, that you're going to have a rough overlay of where you want to go. You're going to look at individual deals, and really good fund managers are going to come to you with the opportunities and say, hey, we've got this one, does it fit your portfolio? You look at it compared to other things around the world and go, yes, no. You then might put overlays in. I think it was CalPERS did a governance overlay. Others are doing ESG overlays. They're finding that helps them. So it's becoming a lot more complicated, the asset allocation, but still smarter, I think.
Can we take that point on ESG? There were some questions on there on ESG. Will there be... Is that going to become even more dominant in 10 years' time? Will it just become a matter of course that all of those elements that are covered in ESG are just natural parts of investing? So it's not responsible investing, it's just investing. Or will it still be something that's considered sort of an overlay?
We got response that 60-odd% thought the role of ESG will increase, 25 said it will stay the same, and just about 5 said it will be uncertain, and 2 saying it will decrease. So it's going to remain, become more important, whether it's an overlay or embedded. I think you're going to have to cover it off in your own organisations.
It's interesting, what we've seen talking to people in the market around ESG is a switch in strategy from the excluding of certain securities more to a removing themselves from the stranded assets, fossil fuels, things that it's seen that the assets will decline in value. So rather than being a choice based on ethics, it's more around removing yourself from a non-profitable security.
Well, I think as a fiduciary investor, you can't really sit there. As much as ethics needs to play a part, it needs to be a part of the, what are you trying to do in the end? And if you can justify it in terms of performance, then that's the way it should run.
Also think that a good manager, a good investment, good business looks at the actual underlying investments and goes, yes, that's being run properly. They've got their ESG covered off compared to those that don't. And that, I think, is the key here. You've got to look at the management. Management always makes a difference, as we know.
So I've got a few more questions coming up here. What focus do not-for-profit funds have on the innovation agenda, and what would be the big ticket items that you saw coming out of the research?
Again, personalisation of data and information was probably the key one. You've got a lot of information on your members. It's just putting it together, using the technology so that they can go online and in real time see what their assets are actually doing, what their allocations are. We see the kids on the phone all the time. If it was a bit more interesting to look at their super, they might do it a couple of times a year. But that's just so hard these days. There's a few funds out there that are getting close. I think we're just going to see everybody doing that in 10 years. So I think that'll really be a big one, the personalisation, the better use of technology for data.
I mean, I think we're certainly seeing that now. Funds have got, I know a number of funds that would have 5 or 6 people in data analytics team now just analysing member data, bringing other data to sit over the top of that to understand who they are. And then I think the notion of even cohorts will change as well. So it just won't be 2 or 3 cohorts, it'll be 400,000 individual cohorts. But that must come at a cost as well.
That's fun for the technology providers, really, isn't it?
One of the questions here is there any vision of how SuperStream will expand and affect member services? Did any of that come through in how the current systems that we've got in place will expand and start to take over this?
Not hugely. The only one was about whether it moves into life cycle funds.
Right.
Not a lot. Didn't seem that much interest in it. I think whether people think it's already ticked off.
Still a long way to go.
I would have thought so, but
with SuperStream.
Yeah.
But I mean, life cycle funds. We should go back to life cycle funds because it was pretty split.
It was very split.
And I think we're seeing that with the MySupers. There's a few funds that have got life cycle funds. Some people very much believe in it. Some people don't. At a couple of conferences I've been at recently, people have been talking about, I guess, the bucket strategy. And so using more growth assets in retirement, I guess that's something that financial planners have been doing for quite a while. But it seems to be that now it's a transformation to automation of that. So it's actually working with the member to understand when things should be bought and sold. Was there anything coming through from that life cycle discussion in the paper that starts to say where they might transform life cycle products?
Again, I think we're not quite advanced as we need to be. Members are uncertain exactly what life cycle investing does, so that's up to us to explain how it works as part of the cradle to grave solution. What it actually involves, when do you switch, for example, into some less risky allocations. So I think it's got another step to go. It can be pretty much automated. Someone turns 55, their allocations start to switch. Imagine if you started to put that with what's happening in the market, going, oh, that part of the market's not looking great, we better start moving people out of there. Technology will have us pretty close to that in 10 years, if not already done by 10 years. That'll be a lot more automated. And big data's fine, and we talk about it as, oh, here's the trend of the likes. But if we don't actually use that data for something, it's of little point. So you can be spending a lot of money on big data, but if you're not using it to help your members better engage with you, you may be putting your money in the wrong place.
Well, as they say, it's not big data, it's big insights, isn't it? You can have as much data as you like. If you don't do anything with it, it's pretty useless. So do you think funds are adapting quickly enough, is the question? And if not, why not?
It's a very interesting question. as you know, I work for a custodian, not a fund, so it's difficult for me to criticise my clients. But certainly I would say that, some of the things that have come out in the report around the concerns for the future, I think, it's easy to be caught up in regulatory reporting, in concern about regulatory change, in worrying about what the government's doing instead of looking ahead. And when we talked about strategies such as hiring a futurist, talking to a behavioural psychologist, looking at the future, it's hard for funds to find time to do that when they have all these other mundane concerns such as regulatory reporting on their hands. So I think they would like to adapt faster than they are, perhaps.
So where would you see a fund then in 10 years' time, from your guys' point of view, and particularly maybe the member experience? What would you sort of see what a fund should be doing?
I'd see some of these people walk out and go back to their boards and people saying, we need to do this, let's get some help, this is where we're going. We'll have that regulatory stuff pretty much happening automatically. We'll be talking to the technology people straight away to say, we need to do this. We need to get more personalised, mobile, real-time data for our members and investors. We're going to look at how we do our asset allocation. We can do it better than we're doing it in a lot of funds. You've also got great member bases. I think this is one of the things that didn't come out in the report. Some funds have got thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of members. For a marketer, millions.
A couple have got millions.
Yeah. I mean, that's a database. That's something you can offer all sorts of different things to that aren't returns. I mean, cheaper movie tickets. I mean, other firms have sprung up doing all these things. I think there's an opportunity for funds to say, well, if you're a member of us, you're going to get 10%, 20% off your movie tickets. Oh, that's nice. I get an extra value add. And I think that's the left field stuff we haven't seen yet. Someone will do it and the members will go, geez, that's really nice. My super fund, I'm going to see this movie at 20% off. Oh, how come I don't get that? And so you'll all have to catch up. And again, I've got to catch up. How do I do something different? So it's just that left-hand thinking.
I can see someone from Media Super giggling at me right now because I think they do that already, don't they? Because they invest in some movies, they get the opportunity to allow people to see it. But I mean, this is part of people get into this conversation of, is that in the best interest? Is that the sole purpose?
And that's the really good question.
So which is the bit, should they move movie? And some of the discussions we'll have, we've got Tia Kreff out here later in the conference talking about that they moved from a pension fund to a financial services industry. They're managing other people's money. They got all these other different businesses. How has it been to weigh all of those different businesses up and still deliver pensions? And it's not an easy thing to do.
And that's it. That's the key, because you can get some things like movie tickets done very easily, cheaply. It's going to maybe take you a day to organise by outsourcing. Other things are going to take a lot more effort. And I think that as trustees and directors, you've got to balance that up and go, okay, how the focus is this. We stand for this as our fund, and we're going to deliver this. But geez, we can actually add a little bit of extra value there along the way and end up with even happier members who are more engaged, checking their iPhones regularly to see how their super's going and coming and asking me what it means. Dad, what do I do now?
So it seems to me a bit of a thing you're saying there is that this move to mobile is inevitable.
Inevitable.
And that unless you are mobile enabled, that you're going to be left behind.
Which for some funds will be fine.
To be left behind?
Yeah, because they might go, no, we're just going to do this. We don't need any of that. We are going to be the index fund of superannuation. We're going to be straight up and down and basic.
Okay.
So again, you've got to figure out where you want to position yourself first and foremost. Start at the top, big picture, then work down, then tick off all those different things along the way.